Emma Matthews, a devoted wife and mother, never imagined her quiet suburban life would unravel so quickly. But when she met Omar Rashid, a charming Muslim teacher at the local high school, everything changed. What started as an innocent connection soon spiraled into an affair that led to deception, obsession, and ultimately murder. Emma's betrayal would cost her more than she ever expected, and the tragic events that followed would shake her to the core. Emma Matthews lived a life that appeared perfect to everyone who knew her. She was a loving wife, a devoted mother, and an active member of her local church. The Matthews family's home was warm and inviting, nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood where the streets were lined with towering oaks and white picket fences. From the outside, everything about Emma's life seemed idyllic. Her husband, Greg, was a successful corporate executive, always dressed impeccably in tailored suits, and their two children, Lily and Jake, were well-behaved, with all the markers of a picture-perfect family. But Emma's life was far from the fairy tale her outward appearance suggested. The truth was that she felt increasingly alone in her marriage. Greg, despite his charm and success, was distant and preoccupied. His demanding job took up most of his time, and when he was home, he was often exhausted, buried in paperwork or glued to his phone. Emma tried to hold everything together, managing the house, the kids, and her community obligations. But the emotional intimacy she once shared with Greg had long since faded. What she craved was connection, a spark of passion that had vanished. Over the years, Emma often found herself alone with her thoughts, staring out of the window of their cozy living room, watching as the world passed by. She loved her children dearly, but there was a gnawing feeling inside her, a sense of emptiness that she couldn't ignore. She had devoted so much of her life to being the perfect wife and mother that she had forgotten who she was beyond those roles. She often wondered if Greg even noticed the subtle changes in her. One day, while volunteering at the local community center, Emma met someone new. Omar Rashid was a recent addition to the teaching staff at the nearby high school. He was different from the men Emma was used to. Quiet, yet confident, Omar had an aura of mystery about him. He wasn't like the other fathers who gathered around the coffee table at school events. His presence commanded attention in a subtle way, not through loud words or gestures, but through his composed demeanor and the depth in his eyes. Their first interaction was innocent enough. Emma offered to help him with some community event coordination. Omar was polite, humble, and quick to smile, though he never seemed entirely comfortable in the company of others. Emma found herself drawn to him in ways she hadn't expected. There was a gentle strength about him, something that stirred a feeling inside her that had been dormant for years. As the days went by, their interactions became more frequent. Omar would stop by the community center to talk about work, and Emma would offer him tea or coffee. Over time, their conversations drifted from work-related topics to personal matters. Emma found herself opening up to him, revealing things she hadn't shared with anyone: her frustrations with Greg, her sense of isolation, and the aching void that seemed to grow within her. Omar listened attentively, never rushing her or offering unsolicited advice. His calm presence became a comfort to Emma, a stark contrast to the restlessness she felt at home. Before long, their meetings began to take on a different tone. The chemistry between them was undeniable. Omar's quiet admiration for her began to feel more personal, and Emma noticed herself looking forward to their interactions with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. She was drawn to his quiet strength, and he seemed to understand the unspoken parts of her that no one else had ever truly seen. It was innocent at first, but as their connection deepened, Emma began to wonder if this could be the escape she had been longing for. As the weeks passed, Emma found herself entangled in a growing emotional connection with Omar. It started innocently enough. Casual conversations over coffee, the exchange of smiles, and shared moments that felt warm and intimate. Omar was a breath of fresh air, a stark contrast to the distant, often cold demeanor of her husband, Greg. With Greg absorbed in his work, Emma had become accustomed to solitude. But Omar's attention was different. He listened to her, truly listened. His empathy made her feel seen, something that had been missing from her life for so long. She would sometimes catch herself thinking about Omar in between errands, when she was with her children or even during dinner with Greg. These fleeting thoughts started to evolve into something more. She would find herself daydreaming about the moments they shared. The way Omar's voice would soften when they spoke. The way he would tilt his head in interest when she spoke about her life. She found herself anticipating their next meeting, wondering what he might say, what he might think, and if he felt the same magnetic pull toward her. At first, Emma tried to brush off the growing attraction. She had a family, after all, and an affair was the last thing she needed. But the more time she spent with Omar, the more difficult it became to ignore the emotions blossoming inside her. One evening, when they were walking through a quiet park after a community event, Emma felt an electric charge between them as they stood near a fountain. It was as if the world had melted away, and there was only the two of them, their eyes, locked in a moment that felt suspended in time. It was then that the tension broke. Omar leaned in, just a little, and Emma, caught up in the overwhelming surge of feelings she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, kissed him. The kiss was tender, full of the pent-up yearning Emma had been suppressing for so long. It felt like an awakening. Suddenly, she was alive again. The rush of excitement was intoxicating, but as quickly as it came, guilt swept over her. She pulled away, her breath catching in her throat, eyes wide with shock. What was she doing? She was married, a mother. This couldn't happen. But Omar, sensing her hesitation, remained calm, his expression gentle. He didn't push, didn't demand an explanation. Instead, he spoke softly, reassuring her that he understood the complexities of her life, but he also made it clear that he wanted more. The quiet intensity in his gaze was undeniable. His words lingered in her mind for days, and it was then that Emma realized just how deeply her feelings for him had grown. Over the next few days, Emma struggled with the guilt of what had happened. She tried to distance herself from Omar, but he persisted in ways that left her torn. He would send thoughtful messages, reminding her of their conversations, asking about her day, and making it clear that he was thinking of her. The warmth of his attention was both a comfort and a temptation, and Emma found herself constantly battling the pull between her sense of duty to her family and the magnetic attraction she felt toward him. The affair, though still in its early stages, had begun to consume Emma. Each time she saw Omar, each time they shared a touch, a smile, or a laugh, she felt like she was slowly slipping away from the life she once knew. She didn't know how far this would go, or what the consequences would be, but she couldn't deny that the excitement, the connection, and the passion were like a drug. It was everything she had been missing for so long, and she couldn't bring herself to stop. As Emma became further entangled in her secret relationship with Omar, the excitement of their encounters began to mix with a growing sense of fear. The once intoxicating allure of their affair was starting to feel heavier. Every stolen glance, every secret meeting, seemed to pull her deeper into something she wasn't sure how to escape. She had never planned for things to go this far, but now she found herself in a web of emotions that she couldn't untangle. Omar's presence in her life grew more intense as time went on. Their interactions moved from casual meetings at the community center to late-night rendezvous in secluded spots around town, where they could be alone without fear of discovery. The thrill of sneaking around added a layer of excitement to their connection, but it also planted the seeds of anxiety. Emma's every moment was now shadowed by a constant sense of unease. She began to wonder what would happen if anyone found out. What would Greg think? What would her children say? She told herself it was just a temporary escape, a fleeting moment of passion to fill the emptiness in her life. But deep down, she knew it was becoming something much more complicated. One evening, Emma found herself walking through a quiet park with Omar, as they often did, talking about their lives and the weight of their secrets. It was a cool autumn evening, and the leaves crunched under their feet as they wandered deeper into the park, far from the familiar paths that passed by families and joggers. The dim light from the street lamps cast long shadows across the ground, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. Emma had tried to keep the conversation light, but Omar, sensing her growing unease, pushed her to open up. He asked her again how she truly felt about Greg, about their marriage. Emma paused, knowing the truth was too painful to say aloud. Her marriage had become a routine, a series of obligations that no longer brought her joy. She loved Greg, but she was no longer in love with him. She had drifted far from the woman she had once been. Omar's eyes darkened when she confessed her doubts, and there was a shift in the air. His voice, once soft and reassuring, took on a more urgent tone. He told her that she deserved more, that she deserved someone who saw her, who truly understood her. Emma could see the depth of his emotions in his eyes, but the intensity of his words began to feel like pressure. She had always valued Omar's kindness and patience, but tonight, something about his insistence unsettled her. She told him that she needed time, that she wasn't ready to make any decisions. The words felt like a lie, even as she said them, but she didn't know how to stop this. That night, Emma lay in bed, restless and troubled. She knew what was coming. The emotional weight of the affair had started to manifest in ways she couldn't ignore. Her once clear lines between right and wrong had become blurred, and she didn't know how to find her way back. Omar was becoming more possessive, more insistent that she choose him or let go of everything. He had started showing up unannounced, at places she frequented, waiting for her outside her favorite coffee shop, texting her when she hadn't responded to his messages, his words tinged with impatience. His adoration, once sweet and gentle, was now tinged with something darker. It became clear to Emma that this wasn't just a harmless fling anymore. Omar was falling for her in a way that felt all-consuming, and she feared what he might do if she tried to pull away. The guilt of her actions clashed with the passion she felt for him, creating a storm inside her that she didn't know how to calm. She was caught between two worlds, one of her family, her responsibilities, and the life she had built, and the other, a secret world with Omar, filled with desire, confusion, and growing fear. The question of how long she could keep it altogether loomed larger every day. Emma knew deep down that this couldn't last forever, but she couldn't bring herself to end it, not yet. As the days dragged on, Emma found herself trapped in the suffocating grip of her own choices. Her attempts to distance herself from Omar only seemed to make him more persistent. The affection he had once shown her turned into something darker, something she couldn't ignore. His messages became increasingly frequent, sometimes just to say he was thinking of her, other times to ask why she hadn't replied. His presence around her town became harder to evade, with him showing up unexpectedly at the places she visited, making it difficult to keep her affair hidden. The thrill she once felt was now overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of dread. Emma's guilt weighed heavily on her. She was constantly on edge, knowing that it was only a matter of time before someone would find out. Her marriage to Greg was already teetering on the edge, and the longer the affair went on, the more her sense of self was unraveling. The truth of what was happening behind her husband's back began to gnaw at her. She avoided Greg more and more, but the cracks in their relationship were impossible to miss. His suspicions grew, and the tension between them became palpable. Greg started to ask questions, small ones at first, questions she could brush off, but they were adding up. Emma could feel it, the subtle shifts in their interactions. The trust between them had vanished. One evening, Greg found an unfamiliar number on Emma's phone. It was a message from Omar, simple and innocuous, but to Greg, it was the final piece of the puzzle. He confronted Emma, demanding an explanation. The accusations were sharp, piercing, and Emma's heart raced in panic. The reality of the situation hit her all at once. She was caught. There was no way out now. Greg's face was a mask of hurt and betrayal. His eyes were cold, and his voice shook with anger as he demanded answers. Emma, feeling cornered, admitted to the affair, her words spilling out in a rush. Greg was crushed. He listened in stunned silence as Emma confessed everything. She told him about Omar, how their relationship had started innocently, but had grown into something far more complicated. She described the emotional connection she had felt and how she had tried to escape it, but it had consumed her. It was the first time in years she had truly opened up to him, but the weight of her confession only deepened the chasm between them. Greg's reaction was not one of understanding, but one of rage, hurt, and disbelief. Emma could see the devastation in his eyes, and it shattered her. She had destroyed everything they had worked for. In the days that followed, Emma's life began to unravel. The guilt that had been building inside her now threatened to consume her completely. She couldn't shake the image of Greg, sitting silently in their living room, his face drawn and pale, staring at the floor as if the weight of her betrayal had shattered something inside him. The tension in the house was unbearable. Greg avoided her, retreating into a cold silence that left Emma feeling more isolated than ever. She had lost him, and it felt like she had lost herself in the process. But even as the pain of her actions settled in, Omar's presence loomed over her. He continued to reach out, his messages becoming more desperate. He couldn't understand why Emma was pulling away, why she had started to distance herself from him. His obsession deepened. Emma had tried to explain that she needed space, that things between them had to end, but Omar was unwilling to let her go. The obsession that had been quietly simmering now erupted into something uncontrollable. His affection had turned possessive, and Emma could feel the danger in every word he sent her. The once comforting presence of Omar had become a source of terror. She began to fear him, fear his unpredictable behavior, fear what he might do if she truly ended things. But no matter how much she tried to cut ties, he refused to let go. Emma couldn't escape him. And as the days wore on, she realized that her actions had led her down a path that was no longer just about her or Greg. It had become something much darker, something she was no longer in control of. She had underestimated the depths of Omar's feelings, and now she was trapped, caught between the wreckage of her marriage and the man whose love had turned into something far more dangerous. The weight of Emma's secret life finally came crashing down with a force she could no longer ignore. Greg, devastated and betrayed by Emma's confession, had become a shadow of the man he once was. The days after her admission were a blur of tense silence, cold looks, and the unspoken words between them that hung in the air like a suffocating fog. Emma knew their marriage was over, that she had destroyed everything they had built together. But the guilt she felt didn't compare to the terror that now gripped her whenever she thought about Omar. Despite Emma's attempts to distance herself from him, Omar's persistence had become unbearable. He had begun to show up at places where she worked, at the grocery store, even outside her home. His obsession with her had reached a level she couldn't ignore anymore. He sent her messages at all hours, pouring out his love, demanding she meet with him and telling her she couldn't leave him. What had once been passionate love had turned into something darker, something dangerous. The excitement she had once felt when she was with him had faded, replaced by fear. One evening, when Emma was home alone, she received a call from Omar. He had been waiting for her to respond, for her to make a decision. But the silence was driving him crazy. He told her he couldn't take it anymore. He needed to see her. His voice was urgent, almost frantic. Emma told him she couldn't meet him. She was done. She had to stop everything. But Omar's response was chilling. He told her that if she truly wanted to end things, she would have to choose. She couldn't have both lives. The conversation left Emma shaken. She hadn't expected Omar to react this way. She had thought that maybe, after time, the obsession would subside, but it hadn't. It had grown stronger, darker, and now it felt like a force that she couldn't control. She didn't know what Omar was capable of, but she was beginning to fear the worst. That night, Emma went to bed but couldn't sleep. Her mind was racing. The consequences of her affair were already playing out, but the danger Omar posed was just beginning to unfold. She had tried to end things, to sever all. But the fear gnawed at her. What if Omar didn't accept her decision? What if he showed up at her house again, demanding she choose him? What if he couldn't handle the rejection? At that moment, she made a decision. She had to tell Greg. She had to come clean about everything. Not just the affair, but about Omar's increasingly erratic behavior. The truth was ugly, but it was the only way forward. Greg had to know what was happening, and Emma couldn't keep hiding. She couldn't keep living in fear. Greg came home. Late that night, his face tired and drawn, but still filled with that quiet rage she had seen before. Emma met him at the door, her heart hammering in her chest. She told him everything. How Omar had become obsessed with her, how he wouldn't let her go, how she was terrified of what he might do next. Greg's face softened for a moment, the anger in his eyes replaced by concern. But that moment didn't last long. His expression quickly hardened as he processed her words. "I should have known," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have seen it." Emma couldn't meet his eyes. She was ashamed but also relieved to finally tell him the truth. But relief was fleeting. Just hours later, as they sat in the living room, discussing what they would do next, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. Emma's heart sank when she picked up the receiver. It was Omar, and his voice on the other end was calm, but there was a coldness in his tone that sent a chill through her. "I'm coming," Omar said simply. "You've made your choice, and now you'll see why you can't walk away from me." Panic surged through Emma as the gravity of the situation settled in. She could feel the walls closing in around her. She didn't know how far Omar was willing to go, but it was clear now that this wasn't just a matter of an affair gone wrong. It was something much darker, something that was about to spiral out of control. Greg, who had been listening quietly, suddenly stood up. The look on his face was no longer one of hurt or betrayal, but of something far more dangerous. Emma reached for him, but it was too late. He was already out the door, headed toward Omar's apartment, intent on confronting the man who had destroyed everything. When the police arrived at the scene, it was already too late. Greg had broken into Omar's apartment, and the confrontation that followed turned violent. Omar, in a desperate attempt to protect himself, had been fatally wounded in the struggle. Greg was arrested immediately, his actions caught on the security cameras outside the building. Emma's worst nightmare had come true. Her life was no longer just shattered by her affair. It was now tainted by murder, and there was no going back. As the investigation unfolded, Emma's world continued to crumble. Her affair with Omar, once an escape from her lonely existence, had set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The affair had destroyed her marriage, shattered her family, and ultimately led to a tragedy that no one could undo. The consequences of her choices were more severe than she had ever imagined. She was left to face the aftermath, a broken woman who had lost everything,